I spent most of my life looking successful on the outside, but inside, I was falling apart. Welcome to Unwind, the podcast that helps you get out of your head and back into your heart. I'm your host, Blair Nicole, and I'm a PhD candidate in psychology, former trauma therapist, and self-compassion coach. This is your space to slow down, tune in, and rewrite the stories that are no longer serving. Today, we are kicking things off with a topic that's really personal for me: post-traumatic growth and resilience. In this episode, I'll share my story, the wild ride it took me to get here, and we'll talk about 4 myths that might be stopping you from healing after trauma. So, for most of my life, I looked successful on the outside. I was ambitious, well educated, I owned a successful business, I was well traveled. And from the outside, I looked confident and really put together. But on the inside, it was a totally different story. And I'm sure some of you can probably relate to this. I drank too much, I sabotaged work and relationships, and I constantly chased people who couldn't or wouldn't love me back. Always felt like I had to keep proving myself just to feel good enough. And I usually stayed in unhealthy situations far too long because I thought if I just tried harder, I could fix it and then I'd finally feel okay. But no one really knew I was struggling with these things because everything looked great on paper. People would always say things like, "Oh, Blair really has her shit together," or "Wow, Blair is so brave and independent." And I guess on some level those things were true, but they weren't the whole story. When I met my husband in 2017, I genuinely believed this relationship would be different than all of the other ones I had been in. He was thoughtful, introspective, really smart. I thought I had finally found someone emotionally available and committed to growth. But really early on, there were signs that I really didn't want to see. Sometimes he would shut down or pull away emotionally. There were moments of deep connection, followed by periods where he seemed completely unreachable. And over time, more stuff started coming to the surface. He was struggling with unresolved trauma, sex addiction, mental health challenges. And there were moments that were incredibly painful, things that were not okay, that crossed boundaries, and just left me feeling completely alone in the relationship. But of course, I stayed. I told myself that if I could just be more patient, more understanding, more perfect, then it would work. Then, if I did those things, I thought he would get better, that I would finally feel safe and loved. Basically, I was taking on the role of caretaker, coach, therapist, fixer, and completely abandoned myself in the process. If you've ever been there, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So, I want to be clear, I'm not taking responsibility for the things he did that were hurtful. That was never, ever mine to carry. Those things are on him, and I didn't deserve them. But what I can own at this point is the pattern that I kept repeating in relationships. The belief that love had to be earned through sacrifice. The belief that if I could just hold it all together, I could avoid being abandoned. That I could finally prove that I was worthy and then I'd feel okay. So, we spent years trying to fix things. If you've followed our journey at all, you already know this, but we did an individual therapy. We did so much couples therapy. We each did EMDR therapy, IFS therapy, 12-step groups, somatic work, DBT, you name it. Some of it helped, and a lot of it didn't. And eventually, I went back to school to become a trauma therapist myself because I really wanted to understand this thing that was happening for us and that was happening for me. And at first, I was doing it to help him, but over time, I slowly started to realize I needed to do it to get back to myself. Because for me, this wasn't just about one relationship. It was about a lifetime of patterns rooted in trauma and unmet needs. I kept ending up in the same relationship dynamics over and over again because I hadn't healed the parts of me that believed I had to earn love, fix everything, and carry everyone else's pain. So No, that was my stuff that I was coming into this relationship with, and at some point it became really clear that I needed to tend to that or I was going to keep repeating the same process. The biggest shift happened for me when I started working with an IFS therapist. And if you're not familiar with IFS, it stands for Internal Family Systems. And basically, it takes a non pathologizing approach to anything that comes up in therapy, like, patterns, even addictions. Instead of looking at them like something is inherently wrong with you, it just views them as parts of you that are trying to cope in the only way it knows how. So, anyway, I started working with this IFS therapist, and he took the approach that there was actually nothing wrong with me. And maybe that sounds a little weird, but essentially what he was conveying to me was that my feelings and behaviors made sense based on what I had experienced in my life, that my coping made sense, that I didn't need to shame or fix myself. I just needed to understand myself and show up and support myself in ways that I had never received. So, for me, this was the beginning of real healing. I stopped trying to outrun the pain and started listening to it instead. I started showing up for the parts of me that felt scared, unworthy, angry. Over time, became the safe person I'd always needed. And then making that shift from trying harder to fix everything to trying softer is actually what changed everything. That's where the post-traumatic growth happened for me. And coincidentally, that's also where it happened for my husband. From that space, I found clarity. I found peace. I found purpose. I found myself. And that's why I created this podcast, because I know I'm not the only one who's been stuck in that loop. I know what it feels like to be exhausted from doing everything right and still feel like it's not enough. I believe we all have the capacity to heal, but we need more honest conversations about what that actually looks like. And that's what we're going to do here. In just a moment, we'll discuss 4 common myths around healing from trauma that might be standing in your way. If you're tired of feeling insecure or like you're never good enough, especially in love and relationships, this is for you. Becoming the love of your life is a self-paced course designed to help you stop chasing love and validation from people who can't give it to you and start building real self-acceptance, confidence, and self-love from within. You'll learn how to break the cycle of insecurity and finally feel safe, accepted, and good enough from the inside out. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about realizing there was never anything wrong with you to begin with. Learn more at blairnicole.blog/coaching or click the link in the show notes. So, if you've been through trauma, or if you're just struggling with insecurity, anxiety, self-sabotage, or ending up in the same painful relationships again and again, I just want to reiterate that healing is possible. Growth is possible. I'm proof of that. My husband is proof of that. But it might not look like what you've been told. In order to experience post-traumatic growth and healing, you may need to unlearn some of the advice you've heard in therapy, pop psychology, social media, because some of it might sound empowering, but might actually keep you stuck if it skips over the hard parts or oversimplifies your experience. And a quick disclaimer before we dive in, what I'm about to share is based on my personal experiences, my professional work, and my research in psychology, but it's not medical or therapeutic advice. If you are dealing with a serious mental health concern, please reach out to a qualified professional, as this podcast would not be the appropriate place for that. So, here are 4 things that might be holding you back from true post-traumatic growth and what you should consider instead. The first one, take responsibility for your part, but not for what isn't yours. So, there was a time when I took responsibility for everything in my relationships. And to be fair, of course I messed some things up. I'm human. I said things I regret. I coped in ways that weren't always the best. And taking ownership of those things was super important. Of course, we need to take accountability for our own stuff and have awareness of our own stuff. But I also needed to recognize the things that weren't mine. I needed to recognize and come to terms with some of the things that happened to me that I didn't deserve. The moments I was hurt, gaslit, or abandoned, I needed to admit to myself, first and foremost, that I had been mistreated and that it wasn't my fault. Social media often glorifies radical accountability, and even a lot of 12-step groups promote the idea that we should take responsibility for everything that happens to us. And while I understand that that mindset can be useful in some contexts, it can also be incredibly harmful and it can hold us back if we apply it to situations where we were truly victimized. So taking responsibility for everything gave me the illusion of control. If it's my fault, then maybe I can fix it all. But it kept me trapped in that cycle of trying to control people and things because I was taking on the burden of things that weren't mine. There are things people do that are not your fault. There are things that have probably happened to you that you didn't deserve and that you cannot control or fix. Admitting that can feel powerless at first, but it's actually a necessary part of reclaiming your truth and your power. Being able to discern between what is yours and what to take responsibility for versus what isn't yours, and coming to terms and making some peace with the things that have happened to you that you didn't deserve. Another one that I come across a lot: toxic positivity doesn't heal. We live in a culture that wants to prescribe an affirmation or a gratitude list for just about everything. And to be clear, I have used both. They definitely have their place, but not if you're using them to bypass or silence the parts within you that are hurting. If you notice your inner critic showing up, for example, instead of forcing a positive mantra on top of it, try getting curious about it instead. You can ask, what is this part of me afraid of? What does it want me to know? Our emotions and patterns always make sense when we get curious about them and we can come to a place of understanding that they're there for a reason. You don't need to drown in hard emotions, but you also don't need to shut them down. When we create space to witness our full experience, grief, anger, sadness, confusion, those emotions begin to soften and stop running the show. Ignoring them doesn't make them go away, it makes them louder. Think about it this way. In your relationship with others, would those relationships thrive if you only accepted the other person when they're happy, fun, or positive? Probably not. You probably already know that the closest, best relationships are the ones that are there even when you're feeling down, even when you're struggling. So then why is that not the benchmark for ourselves? Learning to be present with ourselves and to become a loving presence, even when we're having so-called negative emotions, is a sign of growth, and it's absolutely necessary for healing. And let's be honest, just being positive all the time isn't realistic. It's not the point. Authenticity and self-connection is the goal, not positivity. Connection with self and accepting yourself no matter where you're at is what truly creates healing and space to move forward. Another one that really gets me, that I've kind of changed my stance on at various points throughout the years, is you can't love anyone until you love yourself. It really oversimplifies the truth, and it can be misinterpreted. So yes, self-love is important. I have an entire course dedicated to self-love. I obviously think it's important. But it's not always the starting point, and it's not something we need to be shamed about if we're struggling with. In our society, ultra-independence tends to be glamorized, and struggling to love yourself can almost feel stigmatizing, like there's something wrong with you. The thing is, though, self-love is not an inherent personality trait. It's a learned habit. People learn what love feels like by being loved first. One safe person, a safe parent, one moment of being seen. That can be the spark that helps you build love from the inside out. If no one has ever modeled that for you, of course it's going to be hard to love yourself. It's not a personal failure, it's just a gap in experience. And you can learn to do it through safe relationships with others and through cultivating a secure relationship with yourself. Ideally, by having both of those things. So no, that doesn't mean go out and try to find someone to fix you or do the work for you or to relinquish ownership over learning to love yourself. That's not what I'm saying. And that's not anyone else's responsibility. But what I am saying is If you struggle with self-love, it's simply because you haven't been shown how to do it. There's nothing inherently wrong with you, and there's nothing to be ashamed about. I am also saying there's nothing wrong with wanting to be loved by others. Despite what society would have you believe, we as humans are wired for connection. The goal is not to become so self-sufficient that you never need anyone. The goal is to build a secure base inside yourself so that you can love and be loved in a healthy way. And that's what I teach in my course, Becoming the Love of Your Life. Because learning how to love yourself is possible, but it's a process, and so many of us are learning how to do it for the first time. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is that hustling won't heal you, and self-care is not another performance. You don't need more willpower. You do not need another routine or checklist or self-improvement sprint. Healing doesn't happen by forcing yourself to be better. It happens by learning to meet yourself exactly where you're at. What if the answer isn't trying harder, but trying softer? What if you offered yourself the same compassion and presence you've been looking for elsewhere? Trying softer simply means slowing down enough to hear your needs. Letting go of the idea that healing has to be productive. Self-care was never intended to be another performance or to-do list. It should be about building a caring and compassionate relationship with yourself so that you know what you truly need. And that's the paradox. When we finally stop pushing and start listening, things actually do begin to shift and change. So, if you take anything away from this episode, let it be this. Healing doesn't mean becoming someone new. It just means learning to listen to yourself again, because you already have the answers inside you. It means learning how to feel and how to trust the process. And it means letting go of the pressure to get it perfect and choosing how to show up for yourself with honesty and compassion instead. You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to do it perfectly, but you do deserve support. And you deserve to feel safe, loved, and accepted for who you are. And that's what we're here to explore together on this podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Unwind, the podcast that helps you get out of your head and back into your heart. If you loved this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who needs it. If you want to go deeper, you can get free immersive meditations at blairnicole.blog/unwind. You can explore online coaching programs at blairnicole.blog/coaching. And you can grab my book, 31 Days of Self-Compassion, on Amazon to start building a habit of self-compassion one day at a time. Everything I create is designed to help you remember you are enough and you already have everything you need within you to heal. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.